with his powerful brainwaves cradled in the warmth of reasoning. It's time for Johnny Walker Dread to straighten you out on a thing or two. Emanating all the way from exciting Las Vegas, Oklahoma, it's the Johnny Walker Dread Show.
Okay, so you may be wondering what's wrong with this passage that's highlighted. Let's just read the first sentence. The majority of students are single. Only 9.4% are married. 1/5 of the student population has children, while almost 11% support other family members within the household. What's the problem with this? It's in the wrong section. This should be in the introduction. And in fact, it is. She's basically repeating what was in the introduction because, again, we're trying to pad the dissertation, make it longer. But this is methodology. This is how did you conduct the study? What were the protocols, which you didn't really have any, that kind of thing. And why is she putting this here? Well, again, she's just trying to make her dissertation longer. But the problem here is more serious. She doesn't know how to structure a large-scale document. This is the reason why you should use graphic organizers in writing. Graphic organizers allow you to place the things where they need to be. Then you write the paper. She didn't use one. So she's out of control here. She's just throwing stuff in various sections and like it makes no sense at all. Okay, it says approximately 85% of the student body felt that a student center might encourage friendships among students. Again, might. Currently, the cafeteria serves as a gathering place for students because Delaware Tech has no other space where they can gather informally. The cafeteria is impersonal, not an appealing place for students to gather. Really? How are you making that deduction? Did you survey them? And the answer is no. This is her preconceived notion of the problem that she sees at the college. When the new biotech building is planned, a student center should be a consideration of the administration. So again, she walked into this thinking student center good, and now she's trying to prove it by surveying students. Keep in mind, again, this is the methodology section. This doesn't belong here. Your views about why you think the cafeteria is impersonal and needs to be replaced with a support center are just your opinions. They do not belong in the methodology section, and they should be prefaced that, in my opinion, the cafeteria is impersonal. But she doesn't want to write that because now it looks like it's biased, which it is. I mean, not saying, in my opinion, doesn't remove the bias. It's still there. It's just hidden. And again, Delaware Tech offers a myriad of options. She has a degree in English. She should know better. Delaware Tech offers myriad options. 5 years ago, a part-time psychologist was employed at Delaware Tech, but his contract was not renewed due to budgetary constraints. Okay. When pre-tech students were asked if a campus psychologist was needed, 123 out of 159, 77% responded affirmatively. That's not what they were asked. Let's go back. It states here, in your opinion, would a campus psychologist be helpful to students? They were not asked whether a psychologist was needed. Two different things. A psychologist might be helpful, but a student might say, well, yeah, but it's true, but it's not really needed. Because you have to pay for a psychologist. You're talking $150,000 a year. So this brings us to a little tip, and I've been trying to cast this reading of her dissertation in terms of tips to you on how to write better reports. And the tip is, if you have survey questions and you mention those survey questions in the prose, in the main body of your text, do not paraphrase. Cite it exactly. What is the trick she's pulling here? She wants to make strong statements in the conclusions, but she wants to ask weaker questions in the surveys to drive the numbers up. I mean, when she's writing these questions for the surveys, she's changing the wording because she wants to raise the numbers up. Many students identified psychological problems they observed among students on campus. The number one problem cited was stress. I hope so. I mean, you do want to have a certain amount of stress on campuses because the campus curriculum is supposed to be rigorous, and nothing easy is worth it. If you have a college campus where the students are not stressed out at all, you kind of have to wonder if their curriculum is rigorous enough to be really considered an institution of higher education. So, of course, stress is going to be the number one. You go to any college campus, and stress is going to be probably the number one psychological problem you're going to encounter. Followed by anxiety and depression. You have to be really careful also here. Are we talking about anxiety in the clinical sense or anxiety in the sort of layman's sense, colloquial sense? Because anxiety has a certain well-defined meaning in psychology. And when you're asking students if they're anxious, they may not be referring to that actual definition. So, and depression's the same way. If you're just feeling down in the dumps, that may not be real depression. So, again, she should know better. When it comes to things like anxiety, depression, and stress, there are exact definitions and there are ways to measure them. And just asking students in some survey, do you feel stressed out? That won't cut it. And then she goes on, thus stress from schoolwork had a greater impact than many social problems. Well, more students reported stress, but that may not mean that the impact of stress is that high. Again, students are supposed to be stressed out a little. So although a myriad of health services does exist, what? Come on, Jill, you have a degree in English. You should know better than that. She goes on to say, yet 135 students out of 159 state that a wellness center would be a welcome addition to the facilities. Is that what they said? No. The actual number she's citing comes from this question, where they were asked, would it be something that you would like to see on campus? That's not the same thing. Again, when you are presenting survey questions, the prompts for those surveys have to be stated exactly word for word in the main body of your text. Well, you can paraphrase it, but you better be damn careful that your paraphrasing matches exactly what you asked the students. Otherwise, it's not really fair. Do students violate this thing when they're writing their dissertations? All the time. Really common. But it's something that should not happen. And if her dissertation review committee had been awake, they would have caught these things. And this would have been easily corrected. They would have said, look, you just got to go back and these claims you're making in your conclusion, you got to match them up to the actual survey questions. It would have been really simple. They didn't even bother reading the dissertation, I'm telling you. Okay, so we jump over now. She's going to contact these other community colleges and ask the personnel there what they think. And so she goes to Cecil Community College, and the man's name is Tomika Swan. He was contacted and asked to answer 5 questions regarding student retention. 5 questions? That's all? Okay. Is student retention a problem at Cecil Community College? And he says, no, not really. That's not what she wanted to hear. I guarantee you. And he goes on to say we work hard on retention. He gives some good reasons. What percentage of students drop out of classes each semester? And he says, I really don't know. I don't have those numbers. And then she wrote in parentheses, both colleges seemed reluctant to give out that information. Wait, no. Hey, Jill, don't be pulling that shit. Okay? He didn't know. And if you had contacted those departments and they refused, you should have mentioned that. Here, you make it look like he's basically being obstinate. That's not fair to him. And then she goes on to interview Dr. Vincent Tinto. That's an expert on retention, right? This is where it gets kind of funny. So she asks, how important are the physical surroundings? We have no student center, so she's going to put her case in that, Delaware Tech has no students in her, and you're going to side with me, right? Do you feel that having a student center is important for students to gather to feel connected to one another? So she's basically leading the witness, right? You can't do this in court, right? Like, oh, we don't have a student center, which are known to be really, really good. You agree, right? I mean, that's what she's doing here. Tinto, however, doesn't buy it. He says, well, you've said several things. That students need a place to gather in order to feel connected to one another, and that doesn't necessarily follow students who gather and not feel connected. They can gather and not necessarily feel connected. You're making two assumptions. So he's mansplaining to Jill Biden why her question was bullshit, right? And why is it bullshit? Because she led the question. She basically tried to pin him down with her needs and thought that he was going to respond, and he didn't. And he goes on, look, there are many ways students can become involved. So he's saying, get off this student support center crap. Okay, maybe it might help, maybe it might not. Don't get me to buy into your bullshit that it's needed. In his mind, he's not at Delaware Tech. He doesn't know what Delaware Tech needs. And he is saying basically that the student support center might be helpful, it might not. It all depends. It goes on, there are many ways of building engagement, and a student union is not the only one. So if you're asking me to say, should an institution build a student union, my answer is the institution should find ways to engage students with each other in learning. So he's saying basically no, or at least he's saying, well, that's not the first thing that you should think about. It should really come from the classroom level. He goes on, if it involves a student union, fine. If it involves a classroom pedagogy, fine. You're trying to get me to commit to a question about your campus, and that's unfair. Yeah, her husband is Joe Biden, the most powerful politician in the state, but he doesn't live in Delaware, so he says, fuck you, Jill. I love it. I love it. I have no way of judging the answer to a question that affects your specific campus. But notice again how she tried to lead him down that path by explaining why Delaware Tech needed that student support center. And she just wanted him to go along with it. And it surprised the hell out of her. You know it, that he didn't. He says, no. Student support centers cost money. When you tell students, hey, do you feel like a student support center would be helpful? Students will probably say, yeah, okay. Quite another thing to say, should we build a student support center? Students come back and say, well, who's going to pay for it? Well, you are. It's going to come out of your tuition. Oh, hell no. Hell no. I ain't going to use the student support center. I'm a community college student. I drive up, get out, go to my classroom, and then I get back in my car and I drive home because I got to go to work. I'm not going to use the student support center. That's very typical of community college students. But they don't mind having one on campus for the other students. But if you pin them down and say, do we need one? The numbers plummet a lot. And what percentage of students would ever actually use it? Maybe 20%. I'm not talking about the wellness center. The wellness center is 10%. And then she goes on, if you had one piece of advice to give to community colleges to try and increase student retention, what would that be? So I'm not sure what she's trying to do here, but he doesn't fall for this either. He says, there's no such thing as one thing. Look, student retention, whatever that retention word means, involves a range of activities. And so he's not going to go along with her little plan here. Kudos to him, by the way. Okay, so she finally gets to her recommendation. This is for the college. Student retention is a universal problem faced by colleges and universities across America. No, it's not. You just cited one college that said it was not a problem. Again, she wrote this probably before she even did the study. Now, this is the really bad one. You might be thinking, oh, well, now, come on. This isn't that bad. Actually, so far it is. The shenanigans she has pulled here would have me rejecting her dissertation completely. This is just crap. But this is where things get weird. It states, in fall 2005, now remember her dissertation was approved in 2006. In fall 2005, the retention task force was formed by the Dean of Instruction to address the Middle States' evaluation team's recommendation to develop a formal retention strategy. The task force completed its study and issued its report in spring 2006, the same semester she defended. If Delaware Tech wants to implement and commit faculty to a student retention plan in all technology areas, the recommendations need to be reported to instructional faculty and staff. And my question is, why in the hell did you not cite their study? I went and checked. This Middle States' evaluation team, this is about Delaware Tech. Delaware Tech actually performed a retention review, looking for reasons, looking for ways to improve retention, and she doesn't even cite them. First, another thing is, this dissertation was all about finding a problem, retention, and the problem here is at Delaware Tech, and offering suggestions. But a retention task force already did it. There was no need for this dissertation. Why did she do this? Why didn't she take their recommendations, pull them, and discuss them at length? Probably because they didn't want a student support center. I mean, good God. An entire task force worked on this, and they usually will take a good year or so. In this case here, fall of 2005 to spring 2006. Okay, so a good semester. There are probably about 10 people on that task force. They accumulated a large amount of data from all of their institutional databases, and they wrote up a pretty reasonable strategy, a 5-year plan probably, and you never even bothered to read it.
Hi, I'm the most local person in here.
This is terrible. And here in the recommendation at the very last here in the green, Delaware Tech needs to provide a student center when the new biotech building is built in 2007. So that was her recommendation to the college. She had picked that thing out already when she started. Everything she did was to try to drive approval for the student center. She consulted experts. They completely rejected that notion. And if there was a task force that was convened to study retention strategies, and they had suggested that a student center was one of those strategies, you know she would have mentioned it. They probably didn't. And that's the reason why she completely scuttled it. She wants a student center primarily because it's a money dump. Remember, her husband is Joe Biden, the most powerful politician in Delaware, and she's going to be driving approval to build things, spend money. So, yeah. In my next video, I'm going to answer the question, does she really deserve to be called doctor? Like my video and subscribe to my channel.